The rebellion of rest, why your softness is the revolution. They fear there's a lie we've been sold, and it sounds like this: if you just work harder, push longer, sacrifice more, you'll finally be enough. You'll finally earn rest. You'll finally deserve softness. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud: that lie will kill you before it ever sets you free. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Carmen Hillman, a visionary leader, author, and the founder of Heal a Soul, a woman who has spent her life turning survival into sacred storytelling and teaching others to do the same. Carmen's work is reshaping how we understand healing, power, and the radical act of choosing softness in a world that demands we stay armored. She's not just inspiring people to think differently, she's awakening them to the truth that their story holds the key to freedom, wholeness, and a life that feels as good as it looks. What she shared with me during our conversation on the Soft Girl Era podcast, hosted by LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, is nothing short of transformational. And I believe it will change the way you see your pain, your power, and your purpose. Carmen reminded me, and I hope she reminds you today, that your pain is not a punishment, it is an initiation. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every moment you thought would bury you was actually birthing you into a deeper, more sovereign version of yourself. The storms you survive are not accidents. They are sacred classrooms rehearsing you for the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind of strength that rests without apology. Let me tell you about Carmen Adriana Vlad. She's an immigrant from Romania who arrived in the United States with 2 decades of corporate success behind her and absolutely nothing in front of her but uncertainty. She had to start over. New country, new language, new systems, new everything. And instead of letting that displacement destroy her, she turned it into a platform for transformation. Vlad founded accounting and logistics firms that now serve over 200 businesses across 15 states. She became Volunteer of the Year for United Way's IRS VITA program. She serves as Vice Chair of Play Safe, a nonprofit dedicated to child safety. But here's what matters most: she didn't just rebuild her own life, she rewrote the narrative for hundreds of immigrant families who were told they didn't belong, who were told their stories didn't matter. Vlad's journey is proof that when you choose to heal, when you choose to reclaim your story and tell it without apology, you don't just free yourself, you become a living prayer for everyone who comes after you. That's generational power. That's what happens when you stop running from your pain and start letting it initiate you. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for the system to validate her worth. She built her own table and then she invited everyone who had been left out to sit at it. That's not just business, that's revolution. Now, I want to talk about softness because we've been lied to about that too. We've been told that softness is weakness, that gentleness is fragility, that if we let our guard down, the world will devour us. But Carmen Hillman said something during our interview that I can't stop thinking about. She said, softness is not fragility, it is the frequency of true power where rage, grace, beauty, and boundaries can coexist. Let that sit with you for a second. Softness is not about being passive. It's not about letting people walk all over you. It's about knowing that you don't have to perform strength to be powerful. It's about understanding that rest is not laziness. Boundaries are not selfish, and choosing yourself is not a betrayal of everyone else. Softness is the most disruptive thing you can practice in a culture that profits from your exhaustion. It's the quiet rebellion that says, I refuse to burn myself out to keep your lights on. I think about the founders of Ninth House Press, Carmina Spagnola, Tirene Irfan, and Therese Cator. These are three women of color who looked at the publishing industry, an industry that has historically marginalized voices like theirs, and said, "We're not asking for a seat at the table. We're building our own." They created a worker cooperative that centers equity, creativity, and healing. Authors who publish with Ninth House Press receive majority royalties. They retain their rights after 7 years. They're supported in telling stories that challenge the status quo and seed a future rooted in compassion and collective power. This is what it looks like when you refuse to shrink, when you refuse to play by rules that were never designed for your liberation. The founders of Ninth House Press didn't just create a business, they created a space where softness, sovereignty, and storytelling could transform an entire industry. They proved that when you lead from a place of healing and authenticity, you don't just change your own life. You rewrite the code for everyone who comes after you. They didn't wait for the gatekeepers to open the door. They kicked it down, walked through, and held it open for everyone behind them. And that brings me to the third truth Carmen Hillman shared during our conversation on the Soft Girl Era podcast. Healing is a generational act of freedom. When you choose to heal, you don't just transform your own life, you rewrite the ancestral code for generations. Your story, when reclaimed and told without apology, becomes a living prayer and a beacon for others to rise, create, and lead authentically. Let me tell you about Dr. Carmen Swain. She's a Black woman in exercise science who became one of the most transformative mentors at Ohio State University. She navigated a field where Black women are underrepresented, where isolation and bias are the norm, where the pressure to overperform is relentless. And instead of letting that environment harden her, she chose softness. She built inclusive spaces. She provided unwavering support. She taught her students to embrace their stories and their vulnerabilities as strengths, not weaknesses. Her mentees went on to win awards, enter elite graduate programs, and become leaders in their own right. They called her a port in the storm during the most stressful, formative years of their lives. Dr. Swain became the youngest president of the American College of Sports Medicine's Midwest chapter. She created award winning research programs, but her greatest accomplishment, she showed an entire generation of students that when one Black woman rises and claims her softness and sovereignty, she lifts entire communities with her. That's the power of healing. That's what happens when you stop trying to survive and start choosing to thrive. Dr. Swain didn't just mentor students, she mothered a movement. She proved that when you show up as your whole self, when you refuse to hide your humanity, you give everyone around you permission to do the same. And that permission, that's the spark that lights 1,000 fires. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, this sounds beautiful, but I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have the strength to let go of the cape, to stop performing, to choose softness when the world keeps demanding I stay strong. And I want to tell you something Carmen Hillman told me during our interview. She said, I grew up believing that strength meant swallowing my tears, proving myself through exhaustion, and pushing forward, even when my spirit was starving. Grind culture told me that rest was failure, that boundaries were selfish, and that my worth depended on how much I could endure. But that path led me to collapse. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw a woman whose eyes were hollow, whose body was breaking, whose spirit was whispering, "You cannot live like this anymore." That was my turning point. Carmen's triumph came when she chose to rewrite the story. She began to write, to heal, to create, and to reclaim her joy as sacred. She discovered that softness is not weakness, it is her greatest rebellion. Rest is not laziness, it is survival turned into strategy. Her story is not her shame, it is her sovereign weapon. Today, Carmen is an entrepreneur, an author, and a woman who walks with fire red hair and a sovereign flair. She has built Heal a Soul as a platform for transformation, weaving books, films, and sacred storytelling to help others break their own silence and reclaim their power. Her mission is not just to inspire, but to awaken, to remind people that their story holds the key to freedom, wholeness, and a life that feels as good as it looks. So here's what I want you to understand: you don't have to stay in survival mode. You don't have to keep carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. You don't have to keep proving that you're strong enough, smart enough, resilient enough. You already are. The question is not whether you're capable. The question is whether you're willing to stop performing capability and start living authentically. Your pain was never meant to punish you, it was meant to initiate you. Your softness is not a weakness, it is the frequency of your power. And your healing is not just for you, it is a generational act of freedom that will echo long after you're gone. Carmen Hillman reminded me during our conversation on the Soft Girl Era podcast that when you choose to heal, when you choose to reclaim your story and tell it without apology, you become a living prayer. You become the miracle your ancestors prayed for. You become the beacon that lights the way for everyone who comes after you. So I'm asking you today, what story are you ready to reclaim? What cape are you ready to release? What version of softness are you ready to step into? Because the world doesn't need you to keep surviving. The world needs you to start thriving. The world needs you to rest, to heal, to set boundaries, and to choose yourself without guilt, without apology, and without explanation. Your softness is your greatest inheritance. Your story is your sovereign weapon. And you, in every breath, are the living miracle your ancestors prayed for. But here's the part that matters most: this isn't just about you feeling better. This is about you becoming the disruption the world desperately needs. When you rest, you dismantle the myth that productivity equals worth. When you set boundaries, you teach others that their peace is non negotiable. When you heal, you break cycles that have been running for generations. Your softness is not self indulgence, it is system breaking, culture shifting, world changing work. So here's my challenge to you. This week, I want you to choose one act of softness as rebellion. Rest without guilt. Set a sacred boundary. Speak your truth aloud. Let your gentleness become your strategy and watch how your story begins to set you free. But don't stop there. I want you to tell someone else about it. I want you to share what you're learning, what you're unlearning, and what you're becoming. Because your story, when spoken, becomes the permission slip someone else has been waiting for. And if you're scared, good. That means you're doing something that matters. That means you're stepping into the version of yourself that the world has been waiting for, the version that doesn't shrink, the version that doesn't apologize, the version that knows rest is resistance and softness is revolution. Now go be soft, go be sovereign, go be free. And when the world tries to tell you that you're too much or not enough, remind them that you are the living answer to a prayer your ancestors whispered in the dark. You are the dream they didn't dare to speak out loud. You are the revolution they've been waiting for. So rest like it's your birthright, heal like it's your inheritance, and lead like the world depends on it because it does.